song they were singing a while ago said that there's no need to be discouraged, no need to talk defeat. God will make the trial a blessing. And I was thinking tonight about this text, that last line, and took courage. You find in verse 11, Paul is leaving Melita. They were there 3 months. I want you to note that. It's basically, how long is winter? 3 months. They wintered in Melita, which they knew they were trying to do anyway. They were trying to find some place to winter, and they were there 3 months. And from there, they departed in a ship of Alexandria. They got there in a ship from Alexandria. But half of it was stuck in the sand, and half of it was out in the ocean, broke apart. This is not that ship. It said that it was under the sign of Castor and Pollux. And I don't know, you're probably like me, you really don't know who Castor and Pollux is. I have no reason to even know who Castor and Pollux is. But they were the twin sons of Jupiter in Greek mythology. And they were the sign, or the, if you will, the gods of sailors. And so, I say Greek mythology and Roman mythology. Greek mythology would have been Zeus, not Jupiter. But in Roman mythology, they were a couple of gods that represented the sailing of the world, if you will. And Alexander, this ship from Alexandria, was sailing under that sign. I would assume that there probably is a shipping firm, if you will, or a shipping conglomeration that probably sailed under the sign, so that when you saw that sign, you knew who the owner of the ship was, or who the corporation, if you will, was that was associated with the ship. And sometimes it may be that you knew who that ship belonged. If you saw what was on, I don't know if that was one of the cases here. They were sailing under Roman gods. It could be that they were sailing under the protection of the Roman government. I don't know that, sir. But that's just a thought that hits me. But it was another ship from Alexandria. Something caught my attention as I was thinking about this, though, and I mentioned again, 3 months. Do you know how long ago it was they left Jerusalem? Just more than that. Let's go back for a moment to chapter 27. And the numbers are going to be kind of sketchy, okay? But kind of note, because we don't have all the information. But in verse 4, they have left Caesarea, and I said Jerusalem a while ago, it's Caesarea where they have left. And in verse 4 it says, and when they had launched from thence, we sailed under Cyprus because the winds were contrary. I make mention of that because I want you to understand from the very start, they were having contrary winds. Okay? So what should have been probably a shorter task, they left kind of late to start with. They were in the late fall. They shouldn't have been trying to head to Rome that late. They should have waited till spring, but they didn't ask my advice. And so we got at least, in looking at this, we've already got some contrary winds. And in verse 1, is that where I was looking for? I didn't write down, that's what I didn't do. I didn't write down a verse. There was a one day in here somewhere that was mentioned, and I didn't write down the verse for it. But I was looking at it, and I was thinking one day, and I can't see it at this moment very quickly. The next day, that would be one day. That's it. At verse 3, and the next day we touch sight on. So you understand that one day has passed. They're selling, and maybe at this point, maybe even, anyway, move on to verse 7. When we had sailed slowly many days, slow sailing, many days, and scarce were come over against Cnidus, the wind not suffering us, we sailed under Crete over against Salmone, or however you pronounce all that. So understand that there's a slowing going on. The winds are fighting them. There's slow sailing. And many days have already passed. Don't know how many days are, but there are many days. Look at verse 28, verse 8. I'll get here in a minute. And hardly passing it, came unto a place that is called the Fair Haven, nigh unto the city of Lycia. Now you understand where we are. Verse 27. Because you remember when they left there, they tried to go to Phoenix, and they didn't make it. They got turned around. They got pushed down. And trying to fight this, it says in verse 27, but when the 14th night was come, as we were driven down, up and down in Adria, about midnight, the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some country. 14 nights have passed. 14 nights have passed. That's just going up and down the Adria. We got 2 weeks plus. And a lot of this is fighting contrary winds. And then we read there were 3 months in Melita there in chapter 28 and 11. Look at verse 12 here in 28. And landing at Syracuse, we tarried there 3 days. Now we got 3 months, 2 weeks, we got a day, we got many days, and now we got 3 days. You do the math, right? You keep track of this? How big is that many days? Don't know. But I want you to understand what they've done. Now, if I am correct in my understanding, and that it's not the Malta Melita, but it's this other one up here that they went to, and they would have had sail from there down to Sicily. But Sicily, Syracuse is on the island of Sicily. And it's right, let me turn it so you can see it. It's right on the island of Sicily. I got to get in my mind which way you're looking at this thing. It's sitting right here on the island of Sicily on the lower coast. And right here on Italy's coast coming right there is Rhegium. Okay? Now the reason why I put that out is I want you to see something. My Bible and the map that it has on the previous page shows them going straight up to Rhegium. But in verse 13 it says, and from thence we fetched a compass. That wording means that they went around. My Bible shows them going straight up. Listen to what it says when it comes on. And after 1 day the south wind blew, and we came the next day to Puteoli. Now, what I have in my mind when I read that is that they sail around Sicily because the winds are not supporting them. So they went up sailing around Sicily to Rhegium. And then the south wind blew, and they sailed from Rhegium up to Puteoli. That sounds very Italian, doesn't it? So that but you've had another day. You got 3 days at Syracuse, now you got another day. Have you got an idea of how many days they have been since they left Caesarea?
About 45, 46 so far, you do the math, right? Got 3 months.
Would it not be almost 4 months now?
Over 4 months.
It could well be. I'm just kind of making a round number. And most of this is under contrary weather conditions. And while Paul was not a sailor, and while Paul had the Holy Spirit, the angels sitting beside him telling him the loss of life will be there, doesn't mean there won't be pain. Doesn't mean there won't be suffering. And when you get on this island for 3 months, the majority of the rainfall in this area is in the winter. And while they did have some comfort, it wasn't an island paradise in the winter, okay? Brother John, why are you saying all this? I'm trying to tell you that Paul, since he left Syria, was under adverse conditions. He was struggling. Not that he was struggling spiritually, but physically and mentally, he was struggling. He was trying to tell the Roman centurion what God was telling him, and he wasn't listening. And he was trying to warn them about the sailors leaving the ship, and they finally got hold of that one. And being in that condition where the ship is being tossed to and fro, up and down in Adria, and for 2 weeks, wouldn't that be a paradise cruise? I'm telling you, Paul's worn out. Paul has 2 guys with him, if you recall. Luke and is writing this, and I forgot his name, starts with an A. Wow. Aristarchus, that's who it was, is with him. He has some friends with him, and understand that from what everything you're seeing, Paul is being treated like a guest more than a prisoner. There are other prisoners too, though. But you understand, this is not a joyride. And I don't care who you are. You're an apostle, you're a common Christian. It wears on you. It tires you. In verse 14, by the way, let me tell you that when they leave Rhegium on the toe of Italy, the Puteoli is up in the Bay of Naples. So you kind of get an idea. They are basically halfway between the toe of Italy and Rome is the Bay of Naples-ish. And so they're going inland at this point. You're finally off the ocean, off the sea. Verse 14. Where we found brethren, and were desired, or asked, or begged of, to tarry with them 7 days. And so he went toward Rome. There's another week, by the way. But I like the idea that the indication is that the Christians saw Paul, and they begged them that Paul would stay. But you know, Paul didn't have a choice in this. You understand this, don't you? He's a prisoner. A centurion with his men and other prisoners and Paul, they see Paul, and because of what they have already learned about Paul, they are not the least bit concerned about these friends of Paul that Paul has never met trying to release Paul from their custody. And they are asked to stay 7 days, and they consent. Paul needed the rest. I think they probably did too. And then they started toward Rome. And from thence, in verse 15, when the brethren heard of us, see, you spend 7 days with the brethren there at Puteoli, and as they go in and out, they tell other people that, hey, Paul's here, and he's going to Rome. Well, according to my Ryrie in this Bible, he says that roughly 2 years prior to this, the book of Romans was written. Prior to Paul's arrival in Rome, Paul had written a letter to the Roman church Christians. They knew who Paul was. And the Bible says in there that they came to meet us as far as Appii Forum and 3 taverns. Now, if you were to follow the Appian Way, probably the most famous road in Rome, going back to even this time, prior to this time, this road, they took so much pain over building that goes straight up to Rome, up to the middle of Italy. And they probably are on this road from Puteoli. That's probably the reason why they got off, because it's basically a highway to them. It's a good road. And as I understand it, from what I can figure out and research and so forth, trying to pinpoint things, Appii Forum is apparently before you get to Appii, okay? But it's roughly about, if I remember in my mind right, about 40 miles south of Rome. So they're traveling up from Puteoli. You guys say that a little differently. Puteoli. Going up from Puteoli up to Appii Forum. And from Appii Forum, the next location that's about 30, I think it was like 34 miles, 36 miles, like that, is 3 taverns. And if you type in on Google, 3 taverns, Italy, it will give you a point. And if you'll zoom in on that point, you'll see a little road going by this lot. And you can see the outline where 3 buildings used to sit. I would assume it was the 3 taverns, okay? And the word apparently only means 3 wood frame buildings, okay? But I would assume that this is probably a place where travelers would stop and rest. There are 3 buildings, 3 there. And all the way up to this point, from Puteoli to up this high, almost to Rome, Christians are coming out of the woodwork to see Paul. Whom Paul, when Paul saw, he thanked God and took courage. You know you don't have to take courage if you're not worn out, if you're not drained. If it wasn't going to be an issue, there wouldn't be in the book of John, chapter 14, the words that not to be troubled. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. Later on, in that same chapter, he says, let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. There wasn't an issue with us coming to a point where we're tired in body and mind and in trouble in spirit because of it. There would not be a need to encourage us not to be. And Paul, who in some sense was encouraged. I think that Paul, by the way, the estimation of time when Paul would have written this letter to Rome, to the Romans, was during the time that God had put on his heart that he must see Rome. Somewhere in that time frame between it and his prison time in Caesarea, he wrote the letter to the Romans. Brother Bill was preaching the other night. He was telling the story of a young boy that he knew in the bus ministry up in Ohio. He wasn't always the best kid, understand. At some point, after Brother Bill left Ohio, he asked somebody at some point, what about Eddie? How's Eddie? He's leaving there mutually. Don't you know that's encouraging? And to think that Paul's letter to the Romans was so widespread read. People knew who Paul was, and they were coming out of everywhere to see him and say hi. And
encourage him on his journey.
What a blessing. What a blessing. Let's get a song and everyone stand.
Number 75.